While technology has the potential to empower women and promote equality, it's important to recognise and address the negative impacts and the work towards a more inclusive and equitable digital future. In this discussion, we will be talking primarily about technology-facilitated abuse. An ANRO study found that about half of Australian adults have experienced tech-facilitated abuse at some point in their lives. Almost 3/4 of lesbian, gay and bisexual Australians, 2 in every 3 Indigenous people, and 3 in 5 people living with a disability have been victims of tech-facilitated abuse. Now, these statistics are shocking. And in a lot of ways, when talking about family violence, it is a whole new frontier. More than 99% of Australian victims of domestic and family violence have also experienced technology-facilitated abuse, tech abuse. There are 4 main forms: harassment, stalking, impersonation, and threats. It can include when a partner or an ex-partner sends a lot of abusive messages, makes threatening phone calls over and over, creates fake social media accounts, or makes hurtful posts about that victim survivor, takes over internet accounts and locks out a victim survivor from their accounts, such as email, social media, bank accounts, impersonating them online, shares or threatens to share intimate images or videos of the victim survivor without their permission. And that's also called image-based abuse. Tracks where the victim survivor is and hides cameras that film the victim survivor. There are a multitude of ways to implement this kind of abuse. But this webinar will explore some of those ways and also look at ways technology can be used to keep women and victim survivors safe, create community and resist social and cultural isolation. So I'm inviting you right now to listen to this webinar from 2 perspectives, from professional but also personal, because I can tell you that ending violence against women and girls, no matter what form it takes, it is the responsibility of all of us. So now getting on to the good parts, our panellists. I am, and we are super excited and super thankful to our panellists who are accomplished innovators, change makers, advocates, here to share their stories about the perils of this digital world and the power and limitations of technological innovations to keep women and girls safe in digital spaces. So please join me in welcoming our panellists as they introduce themselves.
Yes, hi everybody. Happy International Women's Day and welcome. So my name is Yiman Lui. I'm a domestic violence survivor and turned survivor advocate. My interest in the intersection of technology and domestic violence also led me to complete a PhD on the topic, particularly looking at the experience of immigrant women from non-main English speaking backgrounds. And I also currently working at Safe Steps. So yes, good afternoon, and I'll pass it on. Who is next to me? Probably Emma.
Thank you. Happy International Women's Day, everyone. And yeah, I'm Emma Costa. I'm on Wurundjeri country, and I work in tech. So I've worked at the intersection of tech and social impact and community development. I've probably worked at the intersection for about 10 years, but I've worked almost 20 years in tech. I predate social media in terms of my degree, so I've kind of evolved as the internet has. And about 5 years ago, I founded a chatbot called Hello Cass, which was all about using lightweight, so SMS technology to provide, to help people affected by family and sexual violence overcome barriers such as fear and shame and location language to seek support sooner and yeah, augment help seeking. And so these days I still work a bit in gender-based violence, but I also continue to work in tech, looking at how we can be more inclusive, particularly around language-based technology. So yeah, looking forward to the chat today. Over to you, Lily.
Hi everyone, I am a passionate social justice campaigner and an advocate for systemic change to prevent family violence. I use my voice to raise awareness of the impacts of family violence, including lived experience of image-based abuse and multiple forms of systemic and legal abuse. to inform key family violence reforms to effect real change. I am committed to being part of the change that I want to see to improve safety and support for women and children who are leaving or have left violent or abusive relationships. Outside of this advocacy role, I have two roles. I'm a midwife and I'm also a research assistant working with an amazing team of researchers, and I embed lived experience into their research. Over to you, Narelle.
Hello, everybody. Taybandal Narag, Nagatha Narelle. Hello, how are you all? I am Narelle in Yorta Yorta language. I am the Koori Women's Family Violence Practice Manager with the Koori Family Violence Unit with Court Services Victoria. I am here today to talk about an app that I developed several years ago, Australia's first Indigenous family violence app. So I'm looking forward to sharing the reasons why and my passion around social justice with you all.
Yes, it is me. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And of course, happy International Women's Day to everyone. My name is India. I am a lived experience practitioner, and I'm also a survivor of domestic violence, sexual abuse, and stalking, which is really where my experience comes in today with the aspect of cyber stalking, cyber harassment. But yeah, I'm really excited to share my story and my voice. I aim to really uplift survivors of family violence or intimate partner violence. And I really want to use my story to bring awareness around that stigma that so many victims of abuse face, as well as the aftermaths of leaving violent relationships and how that technology has been able to help abusers after a victim survivor has left that relationship.
Thank you so much. And again, a really warm welcome. I'm very appreciative. We are very appreciative of your time here today. So there has been an evolution, an explosion of technology facilitated domestic abuse, and with the advent of mobile and online mobile phones and online platforms. So can we share, perhaps Lily, Indy, would you like to just start off and then we'll enter into a conversation flow?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. So as I kind of mentioned before, I was in a intimate partner violent relationship for around about 2 to 3 years with my first ever partner. It was very tough, and I very much thought that the hardest part for me would be leaving that relationship and making that decision to end the relationship, when in reality it really was the aftermath of leaving that relationship. For quite a couple months after I'd left, I was cyber stalked pretty continuously. My abuser knew where I was, who I was hanging out with, and this really was from looking at Snapchat maps, it was looking at Facebook, it was looking through Instagram stories. Even though I was able to block my abuser myself on all of my social media websites, he then began stalking my friends' social medias to again continue to find out where I was, who I was with, what I was doing, which was incredibly scary at that time, and it really caused me to not want to go out, not want to live my life, scared that he would rock up anywhere I was. And yeah, it was a really tough situation, and it really wasn't until I went to the police that stalking and violence stopped altogether. Yeah.
No, and that's an excellent outcome, like to have a point in time where it's stopped. And I think you're raising a really good point, Indy. So it's not only you that was experiencing sort of the abuse, the violence, but the implications with so many people around you, your community, perhaps of support. Did some of those, were they still able to offer the support to you, even though it's almost like, because of you, they are also experiencing unwanted contact, communication?
Definitely, they were definitely able to offer me that support, but it definitely did put me as well in a position that I had to tell my story and explained that I was a survivor of abuse when I really wasn't ready to, and I hadn't really come to terms with that myself. It was a really hard discussion to have with a lot of my friends, to kind of say, hey, we need to block this person because of A, B, and C. So I was lucky that my friends were incredibly supportive and were able to block this person from all of their social medias. But again, yeah, it was a really difficult situation in that time to both come to terms with my own story of abuse, realizing I was a victim, and then as well having to tell people to block this person for my own safety when I really wasn't ready to have those conversations with people.
Yeah, that would be a very difficult situation. And I think, you know, like tech abuse can be, you know, there might be similar mechanisms, but how we experience it, women in all their diversity experiencing it differently. And Lily, you've also experienced the same form of abuse, but can you share some of your experience, please?
So my experience of tech abuse traipsed over things like relentless stalking and monitoring, specifically obsessive amounts of phone calls and text messages within the relationship. And as time went on within that relationship, then there was this expectation that I must respond to those calls and texts within a time frame that only he was aware of. And as time went on, I would get more and more harassed and interrogated as to why I did not respond immediately. Then when I left the relationship, that aspect ended abruptly. He knew that he was not allowed to behave like that. But that's where the online stalking became obsessive. I have in most of my, and even now, years and years later, most of my social media platforms are under an alias name, and I regularly change those alias names to lose him. It was evident within court hearings that we had, because he would actually provide my social media posts. So I do advocacy under an alias. I don't name anyone, including him, but he would print them off and try to use them against me. Other than that, some of the abuse I experienced was, or the monitoring I experienced was bank statements, because they can detail where you were. So he had this level of paranoia where he always wanted to verify what I said. So bank statements were a way to do that. He would take note of the speedometer in the car. So he determined, did she use the car today? And then that would prompt interrogation. I found an app soon after separation. I found an app on my children's iPad that would capture the IP address of anyone who came into your home. And he was a police officer. So he had the potential to be able to find out who that person was. He also, because we were in a relationship, when we were in the relationship, you know, you trust this person. He was always very helpful with my technology. So, you know, if there was an update to do, oh, here, I'll do that. So therefore, he had my PIN numbers. He had my passwords. And of course, the worst part of his abuse for me was the day I discovered his crime against me of image-based abuse. And it is the most violating, devastating and deviant form of technology-facilitated sexual abuse that there is. He created fake profiles of me on adult websites, and he identified me. While his crime might be virtual, the trauma is lived every day. Nobody can guarantee to me or know what the people who access those profiles did with my photos, because it's so easy to screenshot what you see. So even though the fake profiles were taken down, you know, the damage and the trauma from them is ongoing. as it turned out, I found out that he had been committing that crime for over 2 years, and he did that while he was a senior sergeant in the Victoria Police Ethical Standards Department. Victoria Police, that's a subject for another webinar. They have been his biggest tool for abuse, and you know, he knew the systems and he knew how to manipulate them.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. I feel that that abuse it takes on, it's about power and control, and it's, you know, utilising whatever is available, you know, to someone to implement that. And Yiman, you've had a little bit of a different experience. You know, we talked about the comparisons of like the tech abuse that happens now versus, you know, like historically, you know, as technology evolves, so does abuse, but your experience was a little bit different. Impactful in a similar way. But can you share some of that with us, please?
Yes, I'm hearing Lily and Edie, I hear you, and it's shocking what happened to you. I'm so sorry. Yes, as technology advances, as you said, especially mobile technology, it's become more serious and more all-encompassing. Back when I was experiencing domestic violence, the telephone, you know, the basic email, the, you know, fax machine, and all those are technology as well, right? So what happened to me is like, it's more like what you're so right about the control. It's the control of the access and use of this technology. And I'll give you an example, like my sister will call from overseas, he will answer the phone and he say, she's busy, call back later. And so there's like screening of the phone, or like, but at the time, I did not know anything about domestic violence, let alone technology facilitated abuse, that I just thought that it's because of the cost, you know, callings, you know, the internet access, you know, is metered. So, you know, you have to really watch your usage. And the other thing is kind of like email, you know, we have joint account, I don't have my own account, and the trust, and we share password, you know, we share everything, right? And I didn't think twice about it, but like a simple thing like joint account, you know, bank card. When I left my situation, I was not allowed to like withdraw my tiny little bit of money, because I got told if you use your you go to the ATM, you find out where you are, because it will show like where you access it. The other thing is like, now I look back and reflect upon it, everything is itemized, the bills. So phone bills could be itemized, so you got a record of how long you talked to whoever, what phone number it was. And then same as the internet, you know, same as like the bank statement, the credit card statement is all itemized. So everything where you've been, what you purchased is all controlled. So basically, absolutely, I see it as a form of extension of the coercive control. And it's just sad that because our life is so embedded now with technology, that perpetrators are getting so smart that they use this like to continue and extend that control over their victims like us. Yeah, so I hope that answered your question. Sorry.
No, absolutely. And what I'm also hearing is like just the responsibility that each of you have had, that each woman or young person has in trying to protect themselves or create barriers or prevent. Like there's a real onus of responsibility on women and young people, or anyone who's experiencing this kind of. But so, and I think, you know, it's that shifting of the stigma attached and the responsibility that it's yours, towards it being, well, where does the perpetrator of this kind of violence, where is their responsibility? Where's the onus being on them? You know, what would you consider around, you know, changing perspectives on that?
I think that's a really important point as well, is that onus is completely on the victim survivor to stop that abuse. It's that idea of, well, why didn't you leave? It's that idea of, well, you could have blocked them. Why didn't you change your account names? Why didn't you change your passwords? Why didn't you change where you were living? All of this kind of stuff. It is that onus on that victim survivor. And as you kind of said, Yemen, sometimes you don't even realize of what this control is. It can feel normal. It feels that this is what a relationship is, that this is what everyday life is. That's definitely how I thought during my relationship, that this was just a normal thing to happen in relationships. And then again, when I did go to the police for it, it was still that, well, have you blocked him? Have your friends blocked him? What have you done to stop this from happening? Which is incredibly difficult because I have done everything that I physically can in this moment, and now I need that extra support. And that is why victim survivors are going to police for that extra support.
Yeah, I'd add to that the concept that you should just get offline is a really simplistic and unrealistic one, given the era we live in. Everything directs you almost to the use of technology. My work, paying bills, my children's activities, my children's schools, everything points you to the direction of, you do it online. So being offline is not really workable in this day and age. And then it begs the questions, why should I? When I sit and reflect, I realize that the impacts of his technology facilitated abuse still impacts me every day, and it also impacts my children. And yet the person who caused all this probably isn't impacted at all, or at a minimal level compared to us. We need to switch that focus. It should be the perpetrator who is held to account. And if you want to tell anyone to get offline, tell the perpetrator to get offline.
Yes, absolutely. I think we now have keep the perpetrators in view. So that's a good way forward. And I think we can do more. And what consequences would there be when they misuse or exploit technology? And I would like to take it up one level as well, is the system level. Why is it tech is gendered? And then when you think about the situation that many women and children are in, say take myself as an example, as an immigrant woman, I don't have any at the time, I don't have any history of employment. I don't have any history of, rental. I'm just an immigrant person, and I got threatened to my children will be taken away if I report the abuse. And I rely on this person 100% in terms of financial, in terms of digital access, all that. When you take that as a whole picture, yes, the perpetrator need to be we need to focusing on his behavior, but then we also need to educate and empower women to take that tech space, and also to have the ability to have their own account, to be able to afford it, and to have safe access as well. And the online space, what Kathy talked about, the horror statistic that technology facilitates abuse, so many people experience it. And I know all sexes experience it, but women in the online space are still very vulnerable and not safe. So what can the tech company to do something about it? What the government can do to legislate, about hate speech, about, online, perpetrator behavior towards not even within the DV. So a bit sidetracking from the domestic violence, but since we're talking about digital and online, so I think we need to have all levels and looking into, it's not just one person or one thing that could solve this. I think we need a more a holistic approach to look at different levels of how women, today is International Women's Day, how we are being, I don't like to use the word exploit, but left behind in this digital world. Yes, so.
Yeah.
And I think, Emma, I think maybe you would like to contribute, like, because, both, Narelle and Emma have created, a digital response. But I will leave you both actually to explore that area of women designing a technological, approach to women's experiences.
Thanks everyone, and thank you for sharing. Yeah, so I think, Yemen, I really just want to kind of underline and highlight that point around inclusion, really about people's access. And I think that's something that is really relevant for this audience today when you're, it's the Magistrates Courts of Victoria. So I know that there's plenty of work in progress and deployed, but, thinking about people's access of the support that the courts can, and the justice that the courts are there to provide. So, about, what's happening around language and FVIOs, what's happening around language and court correspondence. So often people are arriving at the courts for the very first time, hopefully the only time, but, sometimes you're there, on and off for years. But just thinking about the experience of different people, women in particular, women who come from non-English speaking backgrounds, having a really intersectional, I guess, lens on people's access to justice, I think is really something that I'm really interested in kind of exploring more in our work. I suppose, Kathy, to your question around, I guess, using tech as an innovation, I had such a funny, HelloCAS has such a funny place in my world, where it was my trauma project, but it was also something that, because I was a tech practitioner, I was like, I know what to do. I have an idea of what to do that I can do for myself. And then I was kind of thrust into this position, much like Indy said, where I had to be this, hashtag founder, had to be really comfortable giving TED Talks. I'm neither of those things, and I also was like, this was the worst time in my life. I don't want to tell a bunch of strangers in 3 minutes with some flashy slides, and then have 15 years at the time of my tech experience completely disappeared from the conversation. It was hard enough as a woman in tech to be taken seriously, and then to kind of trade it out. So HelloCAS was created not from a perspective of being a victim survivor, although, I guess that was what kind of kept me going. But it was really about, I guess, trying to have a sense of what are these barriers to disclosure and to help seeking. And as I researched the work, and as I got to the courts, the courts is such a big barrier, the fear and the fear of the unknown, and then the hassle of childcare, the hassle of parking, the hassle of not hearing anything for 6 months. All of these are really, as from a user experience perspective, these are things that we kind of need to be interrogating on a daily basis. And I'm sure there are great people in the courts who are doing this, but I think, this is almost like a provocation to be a bit more bold in terms of the initiatives that are coming out, so we can really start to see some of these changes and start to really support victim survivors from more diverse backgrounds. I'm kind of going all over the place here, and I might just flick over to Narelle because you're also a tech practitioner.
Thank you so much for that. For me, my experiences date back several years. So in my last role, I was the Indigenous Family Violence Support Worker. I have been working in Indigenous family violence for 11 years. That's my last role and my current role. Back then, majority of my clients were 95% women, coming to me for me to do risk assessments and to provide support to them and referrals. The couple of things that I identified with the younger women is that there was such a lack of information that they had around types of family violence. They only seen it as a physical type of family violence that you experienced, but also in the Aboriginal community, it was very much behind closed doors and you didn't talk about it. So for me, it was about creating an app that I'd wanted to do for years, but I needed to find the funding for it. So I was able to obtain the funding through, at the time, it was the Indigenous Family Violence Regional Action Group, which is now you would know as the DELCJA. I obtained roughly $20,000, but I divided it. One was for the Maloga Hearts app and one was for an elders abuse video. In regards to the Maloga Hearts app being Australia's first Indigenous family violence app, Maloga is a Yorta Yorta word for sand, And I wanted to incorporate that with the heart, because sand will go through our hands and we don't know how it'll fall, and it affects our heart. And that's the controlling behaviours of relationships, family violence relationships. So hence where Maloga Hearts was born. And also there were other mainstream apps out there that didn't apply to my community. I needed to do something locally. I needed to look at it from a cultural lens. So it was really important that if I was to create this app, I needed to have a non-identifiable icon that a respondent or a person who chooses family violence will not identify that this is what my client or my AFM is accessing. So I had a love heart with the Aboriginal colours in there. Nobody would know any different. So for me, it was about education and empowerment, mainly about the lack of education, but I wanted to educate them around children witnessing family violence, because that was something I identified in my community that they just didn't think about. They themselves have grown up witnessing family violence, but they didn't think about the generational impact. So that was another aspect of it. Other than family violence, I had links to education around locations, how to turn them on and off, giving them information, for example, around Snapchat, that they may take a photo and it may disappear like that, but Snapchat actually retains that photo and they can pull that photo up whenever they want. It's part of their program. So yeah, it was about them not to feel shame. I wanted to enable them to speak up to their family and friends and not hide their family violence anymore and use their voice in a safe space. The beginning of the app, when you open it, obviously has an acknowledgement to country. There was 000 straight up. There's Safe Steps, and there was the Rumballara local ACCHO, and there's the Marion Community, which is the local crisis, and obviously the quick exits. There were several drop-down buttons around notes, education, Duluth model, statistics, more importantly, around non-Indigenous men in relationships with the Aboriginal women. And then we have information around white and male privilege. So they were the several drop-down boxes. The app incorporated stakeholders locally, but I had to include Metro because no family violence victim would be located locally. So I had Elizabeth Morgan House, JIRA, VALS, all the information that we needed to go Metro. I'll end it with the point that I had a client one day who I provided the app to, downloaded it. She had shown her son, who was 6, the app. So at a later date, she was actually being physically assaulted in her home. The boy did not know how to use 000, but he knew how to click on the app. He used the app to call 000 and he got the police there straight away. The app is no longer active. I left my role. I did not have the funding to continue it. I was not in that place to continue it because there are a lot of intricacies that go with creating an app. I obviously employed a developer. I consider myself the creator, but this is all about coming from a cultural lens for me and protecting my community in a safe environment without being identified that they were using a family violence app. And I would promote that inside and outside of work hours to show my dedication to that source. So yeah, that's all I'll say around the app.
Thank you. And I think you've really touched on another point, about gender bias. It's like, and another reason why we need women. We need women with the educational skill set, with also the lived experience skill set to be able to bring all of those ingredients together to create something that's meaningful and appropriate. Because as we know, like if you only have one half of the world creating something, you're going to miss the other half. And then all the intricacies and specialities within that. So it's really important. And I think, we've touched on this quite a lot, women who are culturally and linguistically diverse and being able to, keep them in mind when we're developing. But then of course we are different, with ages, our education, our backgrounds, there's so much variation. And I feel like there's an element of testing, making sure that we're hitting the mark, and that we should always be remembering we need to revisit, are we reaching everyone? Are we making this experience accessible for everyone in whatever we are doing? There's one area that I thought was that we've touched on here, is around children and generational or intergenerational trauma. It's one thing for a woman to experience herself and then her children. And then, so it's almost like a double bind, you know, like you're trying to, the element of protecting your children, but also acknowledging that they have their own experience. And so the need for education, awareness, support. So Lily, I think you've particularly had an experience where you've sat on both sides of that. And I'm thinking around, you know, like in courts we're doing, you know, we have a lens on children. There's, you know, the kids support programs, and there's elements of work that we're doing, but it's, you know, in your experience, like, has there been a lot of support? What would you have to say around that?
Well, no, not at all. As my kids are getting older, it's only now that I'm becoming aware of the gap out there. There is no advice or guidance for young people who have a parent that has pled guilty or been found guilty of tech abuse offences of various natures. Like, how do these young children protect themselves when their parent is likely to disguise the stalking and monitoring as being responsible parenting? It's a whole, like, when you've got someone who's, you know, has those patterns of behaviour, yeah, where's the help? There is none. So I'm sort of navigating this blindly. Recently, one of my children started high school, and I went to tour a couple of high schools, and I took the opportunity to speak to staff, and I said, so we're in a situation where technology cannot be shared between the houses. How does your school manage that? They looked at me like I had two heads. And they both responded in similar ways. They said, oh, we've never experienced this before. And I said, oh, that's really interesting, because 1 in 4 women experience domestic violence, and 99% of those have experienced some form of technology facilitated abuse. And, you know, they sort of indicated that, oh, I'm sure we can manage it. But to date, and we're in March now, they have not communicated a word to me. There's been no guidance to my son. So that puts a huge amount of responsibility on a young person's shoulders who's just learning about technology themselves, that he's got to be careful not to breach my privacy, but he's been given no guidance. So it's just, again, the onus is falling back on me to try to teach him. And I'm not an expert either. I am a technology ignoramus. I stumble my way around it and I manage, but I'm not the expert. But yeah, the onus is on me to teach him, and that's it at the moment.
I feel like that's where tech is also at. You know, it's like a need rises up or an issue rises up, and it takes a while for a response. And I think, Emma, you probably experience this a lot as well. You know, it's like there's a need, it needs to be addressed, but is that where the money is at? Like there's a cost benefit analysis that may not be, you know, we may come at this from different perspectives. And as a woman in the industry, and when we're considering around that social impact, it unfortunately doesn't always tip the balance, you know, towards developing and addressing some of these nuanced needs.
Yeah, well, I'll just lower my hand. I think like the tech industry is obsessed with making heaps of money. And quite frankly, when you're working in tech for social impact, you're working for people living at the very margins of power, which means they often don't have any money. And so who pays? And you know, we talk about tech for social impact and all this kind of stuff. It's a bit of bullshit as far as I'm concerned as well, because I think it's not entirely sustainable. So both Narelle's app and HelloCast couldn't secure ongoing funding, but we're still talking about them. They're still effective. They've still, you know, they've still helped. And so this is it's just the bane of my existence, because you know, on the one hand, we're using this like a capitalist, you know, neoliberal approach to solve problems that it kind of created, and going, oh, we just haven't thought about it hard enough yet. No, we've thought about it, but people have decided they don't want to invest. And I think with technology and working at in this kind of area, it's hard because, you know, government wants, and NGO, and I'm sure the Maggies want evidence-based, but when you're innovating, we have to kind of build the evidence as we go, and we need to iterate. We need to be able to have that flexibility, and funders just don't like that. They have their neat matrix of like, and exactly how many people did you send text messages to, and how old were they, and if they were under 16, why didn't you report it? So I just wanted to add this bit about children and technology and support. So with Hello Cass, a really big challenge that we had was the technology I produce, I really avoid collecting any personal data because we don't have a need for it, except the funders love to hear about it, but so we annoy them that way. But we couldn't, even though I think it's very helpful if we were able to provide information and advice to people under 16, because of the mandatory reporting requirements, and no one wanted to touch it. They were too scared because people weren't educating themselves, you know, in those decision-making positions around, you know, government or large NGOs or nonprofits. They weren't kind of asking, you know, considered questions around the technology, what happens if, what would happen then, and really challenging the systems that are already in place, much to Yemen's point earlier. So consequently, we something that would have been so appropriate for young people to access via Facebook Messenger, via, you know, they're not on Facebook Messenger, they're all on TikTok, but whatever, they weren't then, it wasn't invented. But, you know, to be where the young people are, to actually be helpful, we're being really risk averse. And I think it's good to confront risk, but there's a risk in not doing anything. And that's where we currently are with so many of these kind of intersections, is that we're just simply not doing anything and wondering why the problem persists. I'll pause.
Excellent. I'm wondering if, because we're now almost at the 10-minute mark, if anyone on the line would like has a burning question, please put that in the chat box. But I'm just also considering, you know, like Australia's legislation has just passed the Online Safety Act, you know, and like, and then what does that look like? And then how do you, you know, like there's so much you can do at a higher level, but it comes down to, are we band-aiding a little bit? Are we just trying to plug the holes in our bucket? So, you know, to me, International Women's Day, gender equality, it's not just women coming up with the answers, it's obviously men and all of those allies, and it's an all of us approach, which I spoke to at the beginning. You know, it lies with all of us, but it needs to be shifted, you know, education of our children, our boys, our men, maybe a rejig of a few structures that would, you know, place greater value in the experiences of more of its people. Indy.
I was just going to say, I have to really agree that I think education is the way to go, and that early education as well. You know, I'm 22, so I was very much brought up with the rise of social media. I don't really remember a time that didn't have that social media aspect within my life. I think I was probably 12 when Instagram kind of became a really big thing all of a sudden. And I had absolutely no education in how to protect myself online, in how to stay safe online, in how to, you know, make accounts private, not let public people see what I'm doing and things like that. And I really think that that's where it starts, is that education for both young girls, young boys, all of these young people out there, of understanding that this is what's happening. This is both how, you know, we can protect ourselves, but this is also the way that we stop it. And that is with early intervention and that early education.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, absolutely right. And also the education needs to be also on the sector as well, coming from SafeStep myself, workers, practitioner, frontline, like we just really talk about the teachers, you know, the GP, all the people who have a chance to educate themselves about this, I don't want to say emerging issue because there has been there. The exploitation of technology is out there. So the education side also need to extend to the professionals, and also we need to have some sort of screening tools ourselves, like if a woman come through, and how do we going to help them? Like, there's different, iOS, different phones, and from my perspective, like, say like my family, their phones is in Chinese, if I'm a worker looking at this phone, what am I looking at? There's a whole heaps of like layers. And again, the onus should not be put on the victim survivor, him or herself, or the children. It had maybe perhaps that we have a go-to tech person. When I do the interview on my PhD, one of the workers said, would it be wonderful if we have a tech person in-house and this thing happened, we say, hey, can you help? Because we are only limited to what we know, and what we don't know, we don't know. So I think that more resources, more like the education, and kudos to also to Westnet, and I think Telstra, they have the phone replacement scheme. That, when your phone being tampered, that is important that you have a safe phone to have the safe access. And sometimes like blocking is not the way to go. It could escalate the risk as well. One woman I interviewed told me that, I got so many abusive messages but I just let it, because as long as I know that, he think that he's seeing all this, he's doing his job, but I just don't look at it like, so because she said, if I block it, all hell broke loose. So yes, there's lots of different layers to we have to think about. So education needs to be kind of like tailored to different group as well. Yeah. Oh, and may I also add one more thing is, again, with the technology, we have to think about also the Internet of Things, and now even like the meta world, and we are still doing the catching. Like I bet any money, I think I already hear about that a case in Europe that I think she's a counselor, a psychiatrist herself. She took interest to this meta world. She gone into this meta world, and she was virtually being sexually harassed, and there's nowhere to go. So it's just like it. I think the offline online is a very blurred space, and I don't think there's any more online or offline anymore. And I see that the core issue is that the gender inequality and the power struggle, and that technology is just an additional thing. But that said, I want to touch on like I'm a beneficiary of technology because without the technology at the time, my lawyer solicitor said, okay, what is your history? I said, oh my God, am I going to sit there and write out every single thing? So I actually hired a computer at the time and type out frantically going through, oh yeah, this happened, that happened, to help with my affidavit, and also I got at the time like a phone that can what do you call that? Like answering, like in case that I can record it. I got evidence, So I'm sure like women I interview also, like they said that, yeah, absolutely, use your mobile phone to capture evidence, take a picture of your bruises or, all that sort of thing. So you have the digital trail. So it's a two-way road. I see it like, yes, it happened, but when they perpetrate, they leave a digital trail as well. And it's so sad when I heard about Narelle and like, Emma, your app is so amazing. I wish that we could get some money and get it up and running again. I was like, oh, I want to put money and I want to crowdfund that, I would like to see some statistic about apps that disguise as keeping children safe, or, those spyware. Are wondering, they are still out there in the Play Store. I'm sure, people will pay money. They're the money-making machine perhaps, and they're still out there, being purchased.
Thanks, Hima. Yeah, really great points. We're going to have to wind this up. We have used all of our time, and I knew that it would be like this because we've got such rich content. But I'd like to offer you all just a last minute. Is there a last message that you'd like to leave us with, Narelle?
Blimey. I would just say be conscious of be conscious of our clients, be conscious of the environment that they're coming into, across all diversities, cherish it and encourage strength in women, and also people who choose to use violence equally.
Can I just say, this is a bit of a challenge as well to the audience, and my mission in our work is to make tech explainable. It's often not that hard. We just use dumb words that are developed so we can charge more money to do certain things. So if you feel like you're not technical, you definitely know more than you do. Go to ChatGPT if you haven't played with it already. Ask, say, explain to me machine learning in plain language, and the results are amazing. So don't be afraid of technology. It's really, there is no line between online and offline, as Yiman said, and I think we're all capable. So please don't be afraid of it.
I think the last comment I'd like to make is just that this is really everyone's responsibility, and wherever possible, take the onus off victims. Focus on perpetrators.
I think for me, it's definitely that we need to be taking these cyber stalking, cyber harassment, anything online seriously, because it can escalate so quickly. And if it's not taken seriously, we will still be losing more lives every week. It's, I think, 1 woman a week now in Australia is losing their lives to domestic violence. So I think if we're not taking this cyber violence as seriously as we should be, then we're going to continue to lose more and more women to that domestic violence.
I just want to say thank you for hearing me. And I want to point out that this is not something new. And it is, for me, it's a part and parcel of intimate partner violence. And it is just now we are facing this more pervasive way that perpetrators have in their hands to exert that coercive control on us. But not, like, I absolutely agree, like we need to, again, emphasize we need to take this digital space back. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you all again. Huge appreciation to all of you today, to turning up and sharing your knowledge, your expertise, and the really powerful messages that you've delivered to us today. Because we need to talk about this issue and more than on one particular day of the year. But I'd just like to, in wrapping up, reiterate the words of Magistrate Spencer, who we got an email today reminding us that every day in our court we see women who are impacted by violence, abuse and discrimination. And we can make a difference, whether it is just by showing a little bit of compassion as we go about our roles, or linking women with our great court support programs or specialist courts. Today is a reminder that the work we do does make a difference in the lives of so many women. To inform ourselves benefits the contribution that we can provide to our communities, and those communities being both professional and personal. So once again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to everyone who joined in to listen. We really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of this beautiful day.